We know that communication is the lifeblood of any company. Any organization cannot survive without effective communication. So communication is also the lifeblood of any successful team or even successful leaders. We know that that's been established, that communication is the key for successful leadership and obviously any kind of teamwork. The biggest communication problem we seem to have is that we don't always listen with the intent of understanding. We tend to listen with the intent to actually reply, and obviously over time this pattern or this style of communication seems to decrease the level of trust among leaders and their subordinates. As Dr. Paul Hersey has advocated, the various styles of leadership, whether it's telling, selling, participating, or delegating, we know that as leaders, these leadership styles work. Now, for communication, this becomes important as well. So if we want our employees to have a high level of trust between us, we should not always be using the telling style of leadership. And we should not always be using the selling or participating or delegating. The key is to match your style of communication, obviously, with what you want to develop. If you want to develop trust with the employees, match your style of leadership or your style of communication with them. Sometimes you might have to tell employees what needs to be done, sometimes you might have to participate with them, and sometimes you might have to delegate with them. The key is to match your style of communication as well as leadership based on the employee's needs. Effective communication in any organization seems to have a significant impact on the level of trust and job satisfaction of employees. So that's our premise here. And we know that in the Chinese enterprises, there's been a lot of studies in this area. However, there's very little study on the microscopic perspective among the relationship of communication and job satisfaction when it comes to the trust level between subordinates and employees. Many studies indicate that there is a relationship between communication and trust in the company. And the flow of communication can actually improve the level of trust. And so we will be studying basically how that flow takes place between managers and employees and the frequency or how often it is done. Studies also show that effective communication between leaders and subordinates in any organization is a necessity if that company is supposed to survive and thrive in today's competitive work environment. Communication with a leader and colleagues can significantly affect the employee's job satisfaction. So as an employee, if I'm communicating regularly with my bosses and with my colleagues and other professionals in the department, hopefully that'll have a positive impact on my job satisfaction. Other researchers say that open communication is perhaps the basic element of cultivating trust. So communication is one of the main strategies for cultivating trust or building trust among individuals and their superiors. Open communication is one of the key factors of employees' level of trust with their leaders. Now, open communication between staff as well as managers seems to have a positive impact on the formation of trust between employees and managers. There is a relationship between communication and trust in any company, in that communication is the antecedent of trust. The psychological state of trust is not static, so it doesn't just happen with one or two events. Trust would develop over time with exchanges in communication between employees and their colleagues, employees and their bosses, in a department, in a company. Communication openness as well as the accuracy of information over time seems to be a determining factor in building trust. So now in this study we talk about two different types of trust: cognitive trust and affective trust. Cognitive trust is basically formed based on the reliability and dependence of others, and that means dependence and reliability on colleagues as well as obviously the leaders. Affective trust, on the other hand, is the emotional factor, such as the emotional investment of trust, genuine concern for others, in having confidence in reciprocal exchanges between you and the other individual or between subordinates in leaders. Some researchers believe that in the process of bilateral exchanges, affective trust arises from the attribution of one side to the other. The conceptual model again here is basically what is the relationship between communication, trust, and job satisfaction in a company, and our population happens to be the Chinese enterprises in working adults in these companies. We basically have several hypotheses we wanted to test in this case. Number one, there is a relationship between communication and subordinates' upward trust. Number two, there's a relationship between subordinates' upward trust in job satisfaction. And number three, that there's a relationship between communication and job satisfaction. And a fourth hypothesis we wanted to focus on is that subordinates' upward trust can actually serve as an intermediary between communication and job satisfaction. So the questionnaire we distributed to employees and managers basically had three different elements. The first was a narrative to basically describe the survey and the subject overall. The second part was the core requirements of the questionnaire, which focused on obviously questions related to trust, communication, and job satisfaction. And the third part basically included demographic information so we could see whether gender, education, length of employment, etc. had any impact on the relationship between these variables. We distributed 324 surveys to Chinese managers and employees, and we received 242 valid questionnaires for analysis. We received a few more, but some of them were incomplete, so we could not obviously include them in the analysis. In terms of reliability, the alpha coefficient communication frequency is 0.69. So this basically tells us the scale is fairly reliable. We also did factor analysis to test the validity of the questionnaire. The results of the test show that the factor loading of communication frequency, communication mode, communication style, communication direction, as well as affective and cognitive trust are greater than 0.5. So that basically means that the survey also has a good level of validity. The study used a one-way ANOVA, or analysis of variance test, to look at the control variables on the mediator and outcome variables. We found that gender, age, education, and level of employees in the organization actually has no significant impact on affective, cognitive trust, and job satisfaction. So we did not find any significant differences based on those variables. However, the length of employment, the length of work of employees have a significant impact on the affective trust, cognitive trust, as well as job satisfaction. So in this case, we conclude that employees with over 6 years of employment has the highest score on affective trust, and this is followed by employees who work 4 to 5 years, and this is followed by those who work 1 to 3 years. We found that employees who work below 1 year have lowest score on affective trust, which obviously is expected. Employees who work 4 to 5 years has the highest score on job satisfaction. This is followed by those who work 1 to 3 years, and then followed by those who had over 6 years of employment. Now, employees who work below 1 year or less than 1 year has the lowest score on job satisfaction. Again, that's expected simply because the person is still learning, perhaps getting used to the culture and still being socialized into the environment of the company. The implication here is that longevity is good for employment, is good for job satisfaction, is good for productivity. So employees and managers should obviously do everything they can to retain their employees for long term. They should encourage subordinates to stay with the company and obviously provide the right incentives and reward systems to help them stay with the company for long term. Unfortunately, in many companies now, 10 years seems to be 2 to 3 years average, and then they say you have to have your resume prepared because 3 years is a long time. But we need to work on retaining employees for longer term, because research shows that they would be more satisfied and more productive. There's also statistically significant positive correlations between communication frequency as well as affective and cognitive trust. There's also statistically significant findings between the non-commanding communication style as well as affective and cognitive trust. And finally, we found statistically significant correlation between bilateral communication direction as well as affective trust and cognitive trust. So there is a significant positive relationship between subordinates' affective trust to the leader in job satisfaction. There's also a significant positive relationship between subordinates' cognitive trust to the leader as well as job satisfaction. So we found these positive correlations, obviously based on the various variables. We also found that an employee's affective trust and cognitive trust with the leader plays a significant intermediary role in the relationship between communication frequency and job satisfaction. We also found that the employee's affective as well as cognitive trust with the leader plays a significant intermediary role in the relationship between the non-commanding communication style as well as job satisfaction. Now, what are the implications of this? What does it all mean when we do academic research? How do we obviously create a bridge between theory and practice? Well, there are some really practical implications here for us. Number one, there's a close relationship between employees' job satisfaction and business performance or goal achievement. So when we're promoting leaders and managers, we should pay close attention to the personality characteristics of these leaders that would be selected for the specific environment of the company. Because the communication style of the leader affects the subordinates' trust with the leader and job satisfaction. So when the leader communicates using a non-commanding communication style, the employee's level of trust with the leader as well as his or her job satisfaction will be higher. So we should try to obviously provide a match there. When promoting leaders, companies should pay close attention to the leaders with non-commanding communication style to improve the employee's job satisfaction as well as the competitiveness of the company or the organization. If you want to increase morale, obviously, hire leaders with non-commanding communication style because research shows that that can actually enhance job satisfaction. On the other hand, sometimes if you need discipline in the department or if you need fear in the department, in that case, you can hire somebody with a commanding style of communication or a military style of communication to bring about the right discipline and hopefully in the right manner. This superior subordinate communication frequency, the number of times they actually communicate, affects an employee's trust with the leader as well as job satisfaction. So higher communication frequency between managers and their employees can increase the level of trust between them as well as the employee's job satisfaction. We should also know that continuous joint or bilateral communication between managers and their employees can improve the employee's trust with the leader as well as job satisfaction. So the goal here is that joint communication skill development of managers and leaders in any company should be a high level of importance for training and development, because that's how we actually enhance the productivity of employees through engagement, through their satisfaction, and obviously high level of trust.